Welcome back to the Speaking and Communicating podcast. I am your host, Roberta Ndlela. If you are looking to improve your communication skills, both professionally and personally, this is the podcast you should be tuning into. Communication and soft skills are crucial for your career growth and leadership development. And by the end of this episode, please log on to Apple and Spotify and leave us a rating and a review. Now let's get communicating with our guest joining us today from Colorado. Her name is Stacy Schaffer. She's the author of With Love from a Children's Therapist. She is a licensed professional counselor with over 20 years of experience who's here to help us deal with grief and seek joy. And before I go any further, please help me welcome her to the show. Hi, Stacy.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. I'm excited that you are as well. Welcome. And we just want to know one thing. What is synergetic play therapy?
Yes. So, synergetic play therapy, it's also known as SPT. It was invented by Lisa Dion, who is a play therapy educator. And the idea between SPT, it blends things like attunement and authenticity and awareness. The main principles are that we are communicating some things without even words, that mirror neurons are connecting. And so the idea with SBT is that like a child, a teen is going to come in to your office and they are going to, without intending to, try to get you to feel what they feel. And so it is therefore really crucial to understand what's going on in your system. And so a way that that translates is like if they were to do something in the sand, create a scene in the sand, you would check in with yourself and say, wow, that makes me feel a little stressed out. I wonder how you're feeling. And 99% of the time kids like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And so it's really like being attuned to who's in front of you because we know that how much language matters and nonverbal language is part of that. So that's kind of the shortened version. It's a like 9-month certification process. So that was like a little snippet of SBT.
Right. No, thank you for summarizing that for us because here's the thing. Every time we go to therapy, they always take us back to our childhood.
Oh, yeah, right.
Why is that?
Well, you hear a lot. Kids are resilient. Yeah, yeah. But what are kids in therapy as adults talking about when they were a child? Because so much happens like in childhood. And it's just really been in the last, I would say, 25, 30 years that we have more awareness that, oh, like there are things that kids could talk about in therapy or kids could experience. And so, kind of going back to that, that's when some of like our foundation begins, like our issues with like attachment, different forms of like abuse happen, all kinds of things across the spectrum, because we're all raised by humans.
Right.
And so humans are fallible. And so there's usually something in there that has become a pattern starting from back when you're really young. I know that that's true for me, like going backwards to help heal some of those wounds in order to go forward.
And is that the reason that you chose to be specifically a child therapist instead of being a therapist for someone my age?
Yeah, I would have, how would you say this? A terrible childhood. And so my childhood, that I've written about is littered with trauma and neglect. And so I always say that who I am is who I needed when I was young. I'm exactly who I needed. And so absolutely for sure, a lot of my work is in wanting to heal younger Stacy and have other kids not have it as bad as I did, for sure.
Hmm. I'm glad that you said that because you know how sometimes they would say, if you wished for a certain type of mother and your mother wasn't that, be that mother to yourself
Yes,
now as a
for
grown up.
sure. For
Then
sure.
how do you do that? How do you mother yourself in the way you wish you were mothered because your mom didn't play that role in the way that you at least deserved?
Yeah. Yeah. So my mom died when I had just turned 22 of breast cancer. She had a really, really long battle with breast cancer. And there, there was a lot of neglect like in there prior to her illness. And I think if I had had someone to like kind of come alongside and help me realize that that wasn't about me, my mom would have parented whatever child was in front of her the same
Hmm.
way. I think awareness of that has helped, but doing tons of my own therapeutic work is key. I believe that that healers should also have a path of their own healing, because
Right.
it is hard to be a human. Have you been out there? Like it's pretty rough.
Mm.
And so I think that the more honest I am with my own wounding, and working to heal some of those things has just helped me to be able to take kids further. To own it, to say like, yeah, like we all have significant challenges. So I think old school therapy was like you have to be like this like non-issue laden person that is just sitting upright in the chair and everything's fine. But like not everything is never fine. Like that's not real. And so I that's what a lot of SBT is authenticity, to be like, to name what's in the room, that you're feeling this. I'm, like feeling a certain way. That it's important to have awareness of your own potential pitfalls.
Hmm. Everything is certainly not fine, then you wouldn't be in therapy in the first place.
No, no, right? Like, but it's
Yeah.
like that it's not, that you're really connected to the person in front of you, and you can only really be connected to the person in front of you if you're connected to yourself.
Mm.
To like know what the noise is, what's going on, and make sure that you have your own outlets. And because it's challenging work, especially in, today's day and age, to be a therapist. And you have to be solid in order to support other people. I
Which
believe.
begs the question, so do therapists have their ongoing therapy sessions with other therapists?
I mean, I do. Yeah, I like, I've written about it, but I have regular like therapy appointments. I always tell my clients they have a grand therapist. And apparently they have a great grand therapist too. And so, sometimes like, well, I had a kid say to me, "Oh, you probably think I'm crazy because I'm in therapy." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, I'm a therapist too. And they're like, "You do?" And I'm like, "Yeah, life is hard. Are you kidding me? Are you
Mm.
kidding me?" And there is nothing true about the idea of arrival. Like, we've never arrived.
Right.
There are constant things that happen along the way in life. And I think it's important to be communicating about your own woundedness to someone safe, that you're like, here's what I'm struggling with. I need guidance in this, and that helps you like guide the people that you're caring for in a better way. You're like, absolutely. I don't think that it has to be, but I would say that I would have a hard time trusting a clinician who wasn't doing their own work, and whatever that looked like. If that looked like, making sure they're regularly checking in with a consultation group, seeing a therapist, like going to group therapy, working through a book, doing their own path of healing,
Mm-hmm.
because we're never it's never it, like, and like pretending like it is not it,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
While we are still human, we haven't arrived, as you said.
Oh,
And also because if you think about all the stories you listen to, all the trauma that your patients bring to you, you also need an outlet because you're
Oh
still
yeah, for
human.
sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, we had there was a shooting in our area 2 days ago at a local high school in Evergreen. And I see people in the surrounding area. And so it's horrific. And because, America, we have a gun problem. And it was important to me to check in with Melissa, my therapist, because I have my own feelings about it. Of course I do. I'm in the community, like there's tragedy that happens. And if I were to pretend that I could just be a solid force without having my own reaction, that's not real. And it's also not appropriate for me to fall apart with a kid, and so I could hold space for these kids that have experienced the ridiculousness that just happened. And because space was held for me.
Hmm. And
That
speaking
was
of play therapy, do you find that it's challenging because you're a children's therapist to get the information out of a child? Is there a way to ask questions for them to feel comfortable enough to tell you what they're going through?
right. Well, so the line is that the language of kids is play, because they don't always have the language. So what you're doing as a play therapist, as a clinician for younger generations, is you're looking for themes of like kind of what they're presenting on the table. I had a kid once, I referenced sand tray therapy, which is basically like I have this like big sand pit in my office. It looks like a coffee table. You can take the top off. My friend Dave made it for me. It's lovely. And then it looks like I have every Happy Meal toy that exploded in my office, and they're in little family groups. And so an idea with sand tray is there's a million directives, but one is find a character to represent yourself. Show me what it's like to be you.
Mm.
And so it's fascinating. It is fascinating. I had a kid once in a high conflict divorce pick Darth Vader as dad and a tiny mouse as mom, and was kind of like showing like the dynamic of what that was like, and knowing the family, I'm like that I can see why they would feel that way. And so you would say like whatever character they picked, be like, show me, what is this one feeling? What does this one want to do? And so like that one would like maybe like hide or try to communicate with the other one. So it's like it's pretty fascinating because it's about the process of what they're getting out, not necessarily the analysis of what that means.
Hmm.
It's like a 3D image of the brain. And so I have seen kids as young as 3. And there was a kid that it was years and years and years ago, but it was a flooding that washed away houses, like it was up in the mountains. It was really bad. And so they used the sand to show like kind of the fear of what it was like for them. And that's a way of not having it say trapped in the brain, and so that they were able to get it out. And when you can get it out and when you name it, like you can tame it. And so that's kind of a snippet. Sand tray is probably one of the most common modalities to use with kids because they don't have the language at 4 to say, I'm feeling conflicted about this situation.
Yeah. The words, and like we were saying earlier, that verbal is, they say the stats say verbal is about 7% of what we say, but a lot of it is the body language, it's the feelings. And even us grown-ups, I think sometimes, even though we may have the vocabulary, but we don't have the expression to really make therapist Stacy understand what I'm going through. Have you find that that's the case? Because I think we may, especially, how when something is really upsetting to you, is very traumatic, there's this thing on your chest that is heavy
Mm,
and you want to express. And sometimes when it's too heavy, even the words don't come out.
sure, sure. Yeah, and it's really important to me to stay connected to kid and teen culture, because I use a lot of examples from like Bluey. Like there's a kid that had like a challenging sibling, and I was like, is your sibling a little bit like Jack, who's a character in Bluey that like they sort of frame as having like ADHD without saying it? And they're like, it's exactly like Jack. I'm like, what do you wish you could say to Jack? And so the latest like tween thing is like K-pop Demon Hunters, this like animated movie.
Right.
It's basically like a pop group like fights the bad guys. And it came up so much that I was like, I guess this is why I went to grad school. I need to watch this on Netflix. And it's good because it gives me insights. So I would say now this week, what characters like do which one of the three like main pop stars do you connect with? Because they're very distinctive personalities, and we can
Yeah.
talk from that point.
Mm-hmm. So that's how they express. I'm wondering, have you had some feedback from parents of the children that consult with you? Have you heard them say things like, I don't see any progress, or my child, are they expressing to, do they come to you and wonder if anything is being expressed by the child during your sessions with them?
So in my intake, because I do an intake with just the parents before I meet the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ask them in the intake, okay, what would look like progress to you? Like, what would you want to see more of, and what would you want to see less of? I'm like, because a lot of what happens in the therapeutic space, like it gets hard to translate, because how confidentiality works is then like, unless you tell me you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to hurt someone else, or someone's hurting you, your words don't get back to your parents, but your parents are going to want to know what's happening in here. So I'll tell them either something I said, something we did, a craft we created, that kind of thing. So that's how you keep everyone happy. But we go back to the intake that they'll say, I want them to have less anger outbursts at home. And so I'll be like, let's get more specific than that, because we want to make sure it's really working, so that you can sit across from your friend at lunch and your friend's like, your kid's in counseling, what's even changing? And so they would say, if it got down to like 2 outbursts a week from the 5 that it was, that would look like progress to me. And so there's measurables that they have, so that they're like, yeah, they are less XYZ, more XYZ.
Mm,
And so that it's less of like, counseling is very, it's not always a measurable science, because like it's a lot of support, and like kids feel heard and seen and valued in my office, but it's hard to measure those.
right.
And so it all goes back to the intake in the very beginning, so that they can say, yeah, like I don't exactly get all the things all the time, but I know what I see at home.
Mm-hmm. So that you know what you're working towards. Now, you've been in this profession for over 20 years. And I'm wondering, since you mentioned a school shooting earlier, I'm really sorry about that. I cannot fathom what it does to the psyche of everyone involved. Have you found that 20 years ago, when children came to you for a therapy session, how are they different now
That
because of
is
what happens? Sorry, go
that
ahead.
is such a good question, because I was talking about that with a friend yesterday. Because I'm like, when I was like in grad school, because I have like a dual master's program, so I graduated in like 2005, 2006. We weren't talking about social media challenges. We weren't talking about school shootings like Columbine, which is actually the same school district, as the one that just happened. That was in 1999. And it wasn't a repeated pattern then, right? That it wasn't a topic of conversation in grad school. They're never like, here's how you support um, like kids in a global pandemic, with social media, like cyberbullying, school shootings. I'm sure they are things covered now, but the back in my day was not. That was not topics of conversation. The most like ethical violations are how do you handle it when you see a kid in public. That's what we talked about in ethics. So yeah, it is significantly different, because how do you support kids that have just witnessed what they witnessed? Like I heard stories yesterday that I'm like, you shouldn't have experienced that. And so I have learned it's definitely not anything I say, like it's how I show up in the room. So there's nothing to say, like, but I'm like, of course you're angry. Of course you're scared. Kids will tell me, and I wrote about this, that they have anxiety going to school. Of course you do. Like, of course you do. A lot of like treatment with like anxiety in the past was like with irrational fears. There's a lot of rational ones going on right now. And it's awful. It is absolutely awful. And so I think that sometimes we try to help kids by assuring them that they're safe. And I think that it's important to look for signs of safety, but there isn't that assurance, that it's validating that's real fear. Here are things that like we can do. Here's how you can like find support, but it's not invalidating that concern with like, oh, it probably won't happen at your school. It just happened. Like I have like clients, friends, colleagues in that area that are impacted as of checks watch 48 hours ago.
Yeah.
And it's a mess. It is a mess. And so there's not enough of us, I can tell you that, that are, needed to support the world in which they live. But yes, that is a different conversation than I was having as a new clinician, for sure.
It certainly has changed, and they are dealing with a lot more than kids did 20 years ago.
For sure. Even the social media piece, there are so many components of that. Because if a kid is being bullied in 1988, they're like, stop it. And then they go home and they at least have a break from a bully. In 2025, somebody bullies them on social media and it gets posted over and over and over and over and over. And there's not a break. They get messages. I've had so many kids that have been cyberbullied, and they'll show me like the messages they get, because they can be like constantly going. And so that alone, I mean, I could go on forever about social media challenges, forever. But that's like one of them. That wasn't something in school. They're like, here's how you support kids that are like getting bullied on Snapchat. Again, there's no way they're not going over it now, but it wasn't when I went to school.
But speaking of social media, would then parents maybe reduce the extent of the problem by saying, okay, you can only have a phone at this age, you can only be on social media when you're 18 and above? I always wonder, because I'm almost 50, so there were not even cell phones when I was growing up. I've always wondered if sometimes they are just exposed to too much too soon, and they are just kids.
I mean, I think so. I think, the frontal lobe is not fully developed, so their ability to have like supreme critical thinking is not online. My honorary niece is 4. And so I like tell her parents, like, if we can hold out as long as possible, and they hear my stories and they're like, yes. So I think so. It's tricky because so many kids do have like Snapchat. And then the kids that don't, like, they'll come to me and say like, I know that I'm missing out, but I also know I'm missing out on a lot of drama that's apparently happening. And so I think so. I think that monitoring is great, but if we can extend it as long as possible. And now there's like technology where they can get a watch so that they can communicate with their parents or whatever. And so
So
that,
even
because
if
that
the
used to be,
parents say, I'm not going to buy a phone, the watch is going to do the exact same thing?
yes, yeah. Well, yeah, like that, like instead of having, like ability to go online, if it's just like it's a just a communication device. Because that was the argument
Mm.
before of like, well, I want to be able to get a hold of my kid, vice versa. So there are things now where you don't have to resort to like giving a kid an iPhone with full internet access. Because
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of perks with technology, but I've seen the dark side and I hear the dark side of it all the time. And so I am under the belief of hold out as long as possible. But if
Mhm.
you can't or don't want to, I think monitoring is key.
Yeah, especially nowadays. And speaking of bullying, I remember when I was teaching in South Korea, it's not even social media. So social media, that's where the bullying that we've spoken about comes from. They were in it's sort of like I'd say a WhatsApp group because in South Africa we use WhatsApp a lot. But you know those group chats. So
Yes,
the girl who was bullied at the time, and this was middle school, these are teenagers. So the girl who was being bullied was first removed from the group chat so that they can gossip about her and shit on
exactly.
it.
Yep.
There's so many facets to this. It's
There's so many ways that they can hurt each other that way. And
mm,
things like that will happen where they'll all get together on a TikTok and leave out the one person and they know the other person is watching. So there's so many things like that. Like it's just one after another that isn't like if a kid were to bring that to a principal, they'd be like, there's a bunch of kids making a TikTok. You know what I mean? Like you can't prove that they're leaving them out, but everybody knows what they're doing.
right.
And so I think that like it's so hard. And again, they don't have fully developed brains. And so we're giving them full access to the world in a phone at all times. I think that it makes it really tricky. And for parents, it can feel like a lose-lose. Like I don't want my kid to feel left out, but I also don't want them to be exposed. So it's a very tricky conversation that I think is dependent on the kid that is in front of you and not a blanket issue.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. And then when we spoke about divorce earlier, I remember some therapists have said that when they talk to the kids whose parents are getting divorced, usually they blame themselves. So they think, Mommy doesn't love me, Daddy doesn't love me. I mean, you're a kid. What could you have possibly done for your parents to get
Yeah.
divorced? What's usually the reason that's the thought process when their parents announce
Huh.
that they're getting a
It's a good
divorce?
question. It's a good question. So I have a kid's book called Was It the Chocolate Pudding? And I read it to kids before, and it's about these two little kids, and then parents are getting divorced, and the kid ultimately has a meltdown and was like, are you guys getting divorced because of that time that you fought about me getting chocolate pudding on the wall? And so like both of it's because it's so common of a thing. They've written books about it. And so the little parents are like, it has nothing to do with you. We love you. It's not the chocolate pudding. And so that stems from a phenomenon that is studied called magical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so a kid would go internally with like there's something wrong with me because it feels psychologically safer than the world is unsafe. My world is unsafe. So they go there first because that they're like that's something I control. There's something wrong with me. And so it's important to have those conversations with like just so you know that like there's nothing you did or could have done or should have done, that it's a grown up issue. So it's a pretty common phenomenon that happens a lot.
Mm. And then one last thing, when you obviously, you use play therapy and they tell you what they're feeling, do you find that words of encouragement or even saying to their parents, when she's home, tell her she's doing great, motivate her, do those work? Or back to the divorce example, they still want to tell themselves whatever they want to tell themselves?
Well, I think that I have the utmost respect for parents who bring their kids to counseling. I think that it is so brave to be like, I don't know what to do. Please help this child that I love. So I think that because I think it is a like voluntary thing. Like I don't see any court mandated situations. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like they're choosing, they're opting in, and so I already have a high level of respect that they're like, please help. And people across the spectrum are different, and so it's like some more willing than others to hear it. But
Mm-hmm.
I think if they're already bringing their kid to counseling, they are looking for support and wisdom of like, hey, here's something that like could be beneficial. So I
Right.
found parents to be pretty responsive, and obviously not always, but so much of the time they're just like, yeah, if that's something that would work, of course I want to make it easier for them. And so I try to frame it in a way all the time that counseling is a gift you're giving your kids, not that there's something wrong with your child or your parenting. You're a human, but it's this gift that you wish I bet you had when you were 10. And they're like, yeah, that would have been great.
Mm. Because it didn't come with a manual, so you can
No,
we can all use the help we can get. Yeah.
no. Like when we know better, we do better.
Right.
So I think so. Yeah. And then, life happens. So people get busy and forget the thing. But I would say like willingness and openness are
Mm-hmm.
something I experience pretty often.
That's awesome. Now tell us about your book, With Love from a Children's Therapist.
Yes. So I wrote this book. I'm really proud of it. So it's called With Love from a Children's Therapist, hashtag lessons I've learned along the way. And so it is a combination of what I have seen on my side of the couch for the past 20 years, and extracted lessons from that, and part memoir of the things that I experienced as a child and like transmuted some of that pain into wisdom to help other people. So it's a combination of both of those things, and I cover a wide variety of issues in an attempt to help people support the kids that they know and love even better.
Mm-hmm. And all the children, even if you're not a parent, all the children can use the love and support they can get right now, especially during these times.
Yes. Well, I have had friends who've read it, who don't intend to have kids. They don't have kids that have said to me, "This was helpful to me, like personally, and my inner child, like let alone like the kids I encounter." So I've another line I've been saying is it's for anyone who loved someone who was 11 or who was ever 11, because we're all working to like reparent in areas of opportunity. So
Mm-hmm.
I've heard so much like in my time as a clinician, then so many similar themes. And so I wanted people who maybe will never have the chance to bring their kid to counseling or have a kid, to get that wisdom as well.
Right. I mean, even for me, I don't have kids, but Auntie Roberta, what do you think? And sometimes I find that my nieces and nephews feel more comfortable asking me questions about something
Right.
versus going to their parents.
Yeah, you're the safe, cool aunt. We all need a safe, cool,
Right.
right? Like,
So I want to
yeah,
be empowered to
absolutely.
tell them the right things. Yes.
Yes, I think that you'd really like that. Like I have in there some good like conversation starters because people are like, I don't know how to talk to my kid. So I have like a whole big thing in there. But a lot of it is like, doing like some of your own work so that like you can be like a better human, really.
Mm.
Because
So
I think we can all stand to be a little better at all times. Right?
of
Putting out
course,
there.
of course. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Stacy
Yeah,
Schaffer, for
that's
being here
me.
today. Yes, our author of With Love from a Children's Therapist who's been a children's therapist for over 20 years and is a licensed professional counselor. And before you go, would you like our listeners to reach you online and where can they find you?
Yeah, so my publishing company made me a website that it's authorstacyschaffer.com. So I always say it's Stacy with no E, Schaefer with a C and two F's .com. And so you can get a link to book. It's on Amazon. I also did my own audiobook, so it's on Audible, on Spotify, and on Barnes and Noble online. So there's a link on that website there, but there's also a way, there's a contact me form. So if you wanted to reach out, you could reach out to me there. But there's links to all the ways to get the book, about the book, and how to get to me.
Mm-hmm. Author Stacy Schaffer. I'll certainly put that on the show notes. And we look forward to reading more from the book and healing ourselves. Thank you very much. This has been such a fun
Yeah,
conversation.
thank you for having me. It was so fantastic.
Absolute pleasure. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify, and stay tuned for more episodes to come.